Let's kick it into high gear. Speeding up! Are you alright? That was one wicked zooming, but what was all that about, you may ask? Well, that was the frame rate increasing, and thus the speed was increasing. Or rather, frames per second, or FPS for short. A frame in of itself is quite literally just an image. However, when combined with a series of images moving at a certain speed, it creates an illusion of movement. 2D animation is a great example of this, as the older days of animation would have animation cells created to provide said illusion of movement. To create that smooth illusion, at least 24 frames must be playing per second. At least, that's what I've seen everywhere, even being taught that in my schools, because Ryan Chester argues otherwise. To which he may actually have a point. Perhaps I was confusing minimum with minimum standard. Well, let's just continue on for the sake of this video that the 24 frames per second is the minimum standard for television viewing. Alright? Let's continue. For a lot of video games, their minimum frame rates on consoles tend to be 30 FPS, or 25 FPS in PAL regions on older consoles. However, even older consoles were capable of the even more smooth 60 FPS, such as this Hot Wheels game for the Nintendo GameCube that is being featured here in this video. Besides being faster and smoother, a high frame rate for gaming generally means more responsive gameplay, which is why some gamers make a big deal out of it in the first place. Of course, as long as video games can maintain even a steady 30 FPS, most casual gamers aren't really going to mind unless that frame rate is dipping below the 24 frames per second threshold, especially if it is very frequent. This is where animation has that beat, as everything is technically pre-rendered, whereas with video game consoles and platforms, are being rendered by the system itself. Of course, in the case with a lot of video games that have their assets rendered in real time, issues with the frame rate can start popping up if, say, too many things are being rendered on screen at once. Depending on the game, this will either result in the frame rate stuttering, as you see here, or in arguably worse cases, the frame rate will run really slowly. Now, I should mention that there are video games out there that do make a significant use of pre-rendered assets. Pre-rendered assets, again, are easier to render. However, the reason why many video games aren't just pre-rendered entirely boils down to the fact that pre-rendered visuals aren't as, let's say, dynamic as real-time rendering is. This isn't to say you can't make 3D environments out of pre-rendered backgrounds, but again, the pre-rendered backgrounds are limited to how the assets are set. They can't budge any further than how they are set. Fun fact! On PAL localizations of Nintendo GameCube games, the startup screen that would have asked an NTSC player if they wanted to play in progressive scan mode would instead ask if they want the 60 Hz mode instead. This might be because the native PAL resolution is already higher compared to the NTSC GameCubes, so a frame rate increase might have seemed to be the more preferred choice over there. Whether it be a higher resolution or a higher frame rate, a device would need more processing power to achieve either of these capabilities. Even consoles, such as the PlayStation 5, come with the option to play at 120 frames per second in high definition mode, or in its ultra high definition mode at 60 FPS. That's it for this mission. Check back next time when we go over Hertz. I assure you, it won't hertz.